know what nobody tells you about being the perfect child? It's that one day you'll wake up at 35 years old and realize you have no idea who you are. Not in some poetic, searching for meaning way. I mean, you literally cannot answer the question, what do I want? What do I like? What makes me happy when no one is watching? I met Sarah on a Tuesday afternoon in my office. She was a corporate lawyer, impeccably dressed, articulate, successful by every measure society hands us. She sat across from me with her hands folded in her lap, and when I asked her what brought her in, she said something I'll never forget. I just got the promotion I've been working toward for 8 years, and when they told me, I went home and sobbed in my car for 2 hours. I don't understand what's wrong with me. Nothing was wrong with her. Everything was wrong with her life. But let me start at the beginning, because Sarah's story didn't begin in that parking lot. It began 30 years earlier, in a small apartment where a 7-year-old girl learned that love had conditions. Sarah's parents were immigrants. Her father worked 16-hour days at a restaurant he didn't own. Her mother cleaned houses until her hands cracked and bled in the winter. They came to this country with nothing, and they wanted everything for their daughter. Not for themselves, for her. That distinction matters, though it took Sarah 3 decades to understand why. She was 7 when she brought home her first report card. All A's except for 1 B in art. Her father looked at that report card for a long time. He didn't yell. He didn't punish her. He just looked disappointed, which somehow felt worse, and he said, "Art is not important. You must focus on what matters." That moment, have you had one like it? Where something small shifts inside you and you don't even notice it happening. That moment taught Sarah that love was earned through achievement, that her parents' sacrifices meant she owed them a debt she could only repay with perfection. She became the perfect daughter. Perfect grades. Perfect behavior. She studied while other kids played. She practiced piano until her fingers ached because her mother said it would look good on college applications. At 12, she stopped drawing, something she loved, because her father was right. It wasn't important. It wouldn't get her into Harvard. And here's what happens in a child's mind when they learn this lesson. They don't just change their behavior. They change their identity. The brain is building itself during those years, forming the neural pathways that will determine how you see yourself and the world. When a child learns that who they are isn't enough, that love comes with conditions, their sense of self begins to split. There's the real self, the one who likes drawing and wants to play. And then there's the acceptable self, the one who gets straight A's and makes parents smile. Over time, that real self gets buried so deep, you forget it was ever there. Sarah forgot. She got into an Ivy League school. Full scholarship. Her parents cried when she told them, and she felt something she'd chase for the next 15 years. She felt like she was enough. For one moment, sitting at their kitchen table with that acceptance letter in her hands, she was enough. But you know what nobody tells you about conditional love? The conditions never end. There's always a next thing. After college came law school. After law school came the job at a prestigious firm. After that came junior partner. Each achievement bought her another moment of feeling valuable, feeling seen, feeling like the daughter her parents deserved. But those moments got shorter and shorter, and the space between them got heavier and heavier. She worked 80-hour weeks. She took cases she didn't care about. She defended corporations she didn't believe in. When friends invited her out, she said she was too busy. When she met someone she liked, she ended it because a relationship would be a distraction from making partner. Her entire life became an elaborate performance of success, and somewhere in the middle of it all, she stopped asking herself if this was what she wanted. Because here's the thing about living for someone else's approval. Wanting stops mattering. There's only should, only must, only have to. I should take this case. I must bill more hours. I have to make partner. The words I want disappeared from her vocabulary. She was 34 when she finally made partner. The day they told her, they took her to lunch at an expensive restaurant. Her colleagues congratulated her. Her boss gave a speech about her dedication and brilliance. She smiled and thanked them and felt absolutely nothing. That night, she called her parents. She wanted to tell them herself before they saw it on LinkedIn. Her mother answered, "Mom, I made partner." There was a pause. Then, "That's wonderful, sweetie. Your father will be so proud. You know, Your cousin Michael just got promoted too. He's running his own division now. Sarah sat in her car after that call, staring at the steering wheel, and something cracked open inside her. Not dramatically, not like a breakdown, more like a dam that had been straining for years, finally giving way. Slowly, inexorably. She cried, and she didn't know why she was crying, which made her cry harder. That's when she came to see me. In our early sessions, Sarah talked about her accomplishments like she was reading a resume. She had trouble with simple questions. When I asked what she did for fun, she looked confused. When I asked what she wanted from therapy, she said, "I want to stop feeling this way," but she couldn't describe what way she felt. The word we eventually landed on was empty. But emptiness isn't a feeling, it's the absence of feeling. It's what happens when you've spent so long performing a version of yourself that you've lost touch with the self underneath. I see this more than you might think. High achievers, people who look successful from the outside, sitting in my office unable to answer the simplest question. Are you happy? Tell me in the comments, have you ever felt this? Like you're winning at a game you never wanted to play. One session, about 2 months in, I asked Sarah to do something that seemed trivial. I asked her to tell me what she wanted for dinner that night. She froze. "I don't know," she said. "Whatever is easy." "Not what's easy. What do you want?" She stared at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to answer that." This is what happens when you live your entire life optimizing for someone else's approval. You lose the ability to access your own desires. It's not that you're being selfless or noble. It's that the neural pathways that connect you to your authentic wants and needs have atrophied from disuse. Your brain literally forgets how to ask, "What do I want?" We spent weeks on that question. Not about dinner, about everything. What kind of law did she actually want to practice? Did she even want to practice law? What did she do on the rare Sunday when she had no obligations? What made her feel alive rather than accomplished? She couldn't answer any of it. So I gave her homework. Every day, she had to notice one thing she felt drawn to. Not should do, not need to do. Just notice what pulled at her attention. A song, a color, a type of food, an article, anything. The first week, she came back with nothing. The second week, she admitted she'd noticed she always slowed down walking past an art gallery near her office. "Why do you think that is?" I asked. She shrugged. "I don't know. I used to draw when I was a kid." "Did you like it?" Another long pause. "Yeah, I think I did." Here's what was happening. Sarah wasn't just disconnected from her desires. She was terrified of them. Because desire meant choice, and choice meant the possibility of disappointing the people she'd spent her whole life trying to please. If she admitted she wanted to draw, she'd have to admit that law was making her miserable. If she admitted law was making her miserable, she'd have to confront the fact that she'd spent 15 years building a life she didn't want. And if she'd built a life she didn't want, what did that say about all those sacrifices her parents made? Were they for nothing? That's the cage. That's the trap. When your entire sense of worth is tied to making someone else proud, choosing yourself feels like betrayal. We had a breakthrough about 4 months in. Sarah came to session and she was angry, the first real emotion I'd seen from her besides numbness. "I'm furious," she said. "I'm furious at my parents." "Tell me why." "Because they made me like this. Because they taught me that nothing I did was ever good enough unless it was what they wanted. Because I gave up everything, to be the daughter they needed, and it's still not enough. It's never enough." I let her sit with that anger. Anger is healthy. Anger means you're starting to recognize that something was taken from you. But then I asked her a harder question. "Do you think your parents meant to hurt you?" She went quiet. "No." "Do you think they knew what they were doing?" "No." Her voice was small now. They wanted me to have opportunities they never had. They thought they were helping me. And this is where it gets complicated, where the psychology gets messy and human. Because Sarah's parents weren't villains. They were people who had suffered, who had struggled, who wanted desperately to give their child a better life. They did what they thought was right. But intention doesn't erase impact. You can be hurt by people who loved you. You can be damaged by people who meant well. The two things can exist at the same time. Sarah had to grieve two things simultaneously: the childhood she didn't get to have, and the innocence of believing her parents were perfect. She had to hold both truths, that they loved her and that their love hurt her. That's hard work. That's the kind of work that takes months, sometimes years. Accepting that the people who shaped you did the best they could, and that their best still left wounds. Where are you watching from right now? Are you someone who's done this work, or someone who's avoiding it? I'd love to know. Sarah didn't quit her job. That's not how real transformation works, not usually. There's no dramatic movie moment where you walk out of the office and never look back. What she did was smaller and harder. She started taking Saturdays off. Just Saturdays. She stopped checking email. She didn't schedule calls. She protected one day a week for herself. And on those Saturdays, she went to the art store downtown and bought supplies. Pencils, paper, paints. Things she hadn't touched since she was 12 years old. She was terrible at first. Of course she was. You don't pick up something after 20 years and expect to be good at it. But here's what mattered. For 2 hours every Saturday, she did something for no reason except that she wanted to. Not because it would lead to anything. Not because anyone would see it. Not because it would make anyone proud. Just because it made her feel like herself. She started painting small things. A cup of coffee. The view from her window. Her hands. And slowly, so slowly she almost didn't notice, something shifted. She started saying no to cases that didn't interest her. She started leaving the office at 7 instead of 10. She started calling friends she'd lost touch with. She started dating someone, and when it got serious, she didn't run. About a year into therapy, she told me she'd talked to her parents. Really talked to them. She told them she was struggling, that she'd been unhappy for years, that she needed to make some changes in her life. Her mother cried. Her father went silent for a long time. Then he said, "We didn't know. We thought you were happy. We thought we did the right thing." Sarah told me later that she'd expected anger or disappointment. Instead, she got something more complicated: regret. Her parents had their own grief to process, the recognition that in trying to give her everything, they'd inadvertently taken something essential away. That conversation didn't fix everything. It couldn't, but it opened a door that had been closed for decades. Here's what I learned from Sarah's story, from the hundreds of stories like hers I heard over my career. We are all walking around carrying versions of ourselves that we built to survive, to be loved, to be accepted. And those versions served a purpose once. They kept us safe. They earned us approval. They got us through. But at some point, survival stops being enough. At some point you have to ask, am I living, or am I just performing life? The psychologist Carl Rogers talked about the difference between the self you are and the self you think you should be. He said that psychological health is about closing that gap. The closer those two selves are, the more whole you feel. The further apart they are, the more fragmented, anxious, and empty you become. Sarah spent 30 years widening that gap, making herself smaller and smaller to fit into the shape her parents needed her to be. And the work, the real work, wasn't about rebelling or rejecting them. It was about slowly, carefully, reclaiming the parts of herself she'd buried. That's what healing looks like. Not a revolution, an excavation. She still practices law, but now she volunteers at a legal aid clinic twice a month, taking cases that actually mean something to her. She still has a relationship with her parents, but now there are boundaries, gentle ones but real. She still achieves things, but now the achievements serve her life instead of replacing it. And she paints. Every Saturday morning, without fail, she paints. Is she perfectly happy? No. Does she have it all figured out? Absolutely not. But she knows who she is now. She knows what she wants. And when she accomplishes something, she doesn't feel empty anymore. She feels proud. Actually proud. Not because someone else told her to be, but because she chose it. That's the lesson I want you to take from this. You cannot live someone else's life and call it your own. You cannot build a self on borrowed dreams and expect to feel whole. Your parents, your culture, your society, they all have ideas about who you should be. And some of those ideas might be good. Some might even be right. but they're not yours until you choose them consciously, deliberately, for reasons that make sense to you. The question isn't whether you make your parents proud. The question is, can you make yourself proud? Can you look in the mirror and recognize the person looking back? If you can't, it's not too late. It's never too late to start asking what you want, to start noticing what pulls at you, to start reclaiming the small, essential parts of yourself you gave away to be acceptable. It won't be easy. Sarah didn't walk into my office and walk out fixed 6 weeks later. It took years. It took hard conversations and uncomfortable realizations and grief for the time she'd lost. But here's what she told me in our last session, right before we wrapped up therapy. I finally feel like I'm living my life instead of auditing it. I think about that phrase a lot. Living versus auditing. So many of us are just checking boxes, making sure we meet the criteria someone else set. Getting the degree, the job, the house, the relationship, all while feeling nothing. All while wondering why achievement doesn't equal happiness. Because happiness doesn't come from meeting external standards. It comes from internal alignment. It comes from the slow, sometimes painful process of becoming who you actually are, not who you think you're supposed to be. So let me ask you, whose life are you living? Whose dreams are you chasing? And if the answer is anyone's but your own, what would it take to start choosing yourself? Not in a selfish way, not by abandoning everyone you love or burning your life down, but in small ways, in Saturday mornings, in honest conversations, in the courage to say, I don't want this, and then the even greater courage to figure out what you do want. That's the work. That's always the work. And if you're in the middle of it right now, if you're starting to realize that the life you built doesn't fit anymore, I want you to know something. You're not broken. You're not ungrateful. You're not failing. You're waking up. And that's the hardest, bravest thing you can do. Tell me in the comments, what's one small thing you've given up that you want to reclaim? What's one Saturday morning waiting for you? I read every comment, and I'd love to hear your story. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for trusting me with your time and your attention. I'll see you in the next one.